I will never forgive Maddux for that. That is what Jeff Bagwell said. Not on camera, not in public, quietly, the way a man speaks when he knows he got played. Greg Maddux did not just throw pitches, he set traps. And today we are going to walk through every man who stepped into one, starting with the ones who survived and ending with the one who never really did. Baseball is supposed to be a fair fight. A man stands 60 feet and 6 inches away from another man. One throws, one swings. Simple as that, or so you would think. The thing about Greg Maddux is that by the time you stepped into the batter's box, the fight was already half over. He had been thinking about you for days. He knew your tendencies, he knew what you liked. And more dangerously, he knew exactly what you thought you knew about him. If you are enjoying this already, go ahead and give this video some hype right now. Hit that button and let us know you are here for it. Maddux was not built like a power pitcher. He did not throw fire. On a good day, he was sitting around 88 miles per hour. Most petrol station workers throw harder than that, but what he had instead of speed was something far more dangerous. He had patience. He had memory. He had notebooks in his head that most pitchers never even thought to open. And he had the kind of cold, calculated intelligence that made every single at-bat feel less like sport and more like surgery. Hitters did not just face Greg Maddux on the mound. They faced a version of themselves that he had already studied, mapped, and fully prepared to dismantle. And he started doing it as a very young man, long before he ever reached the major leagues. Here is the story as people tell it. And whether every detail is exactly right or not, what matters is that the baseball world believes it. That alone says everything you need to know about Greg Maddux. The year is 1997. Jeff Bagwell is one of the most feared hitters on the planet. He is built like a concrete wall and swings the bat like he has something to prove every single time. He has a Hall of Fame swing, a Hall of Fame brain, and a Hall of Fame will to win. He is not the kind of man you fool easily. He prepares, he studies, he comes to the plate with a plan every single time. And yet somehow, every time he faced Greg Maddux, something felt off. The legend goes like this. In a regular season game, Maddux's team was up by a lot. The score made the situation low stakes, meaningless, practically. And right there in front of the whole stadium, Maddux reportedly fed Bagwell a pitch he could hit. Not a mistake, not a miss. Deliberately hittable. And Bagwell hit it. Hard. Out of the park. Home run. Job done. Now, most pitchers, after giving up a home run, feel some kind of frustration. Maybe they shake their head. Maybe they mutter something. Not Maddux. He just watched it. Some people who claim to have been watching that day say he almost looked satisfied, like he had just completed a transaction, like the home run was never the point. The pitch was the point. The memory Bagwell would carry away from it was the fast forward to October, playoff baseball. The stakes could not be higher. The Houston Astros and the Atlanta Braves are going at it in the National League Division Series. This is not a regular season game. Every out matters. Every pitch matters. Everything is louder and tighter and more intense. And there is Jeff Bagwell stepping into the box against Greg Maddux. According to the legend, Bagwell remembers the pitch from that blowout earlier in the year. He has seen that pitch before. He has hit that pitch before. He knows it is coming. And that right there is exactly where Maddux wants him. Because what comes next is not that pitch. It is a changeup. Slow, perfectly placed, completely devastating. Bagwell swings through it and the game turns. The story has been told 100 times at 100 different baseball dinners. Some people tell it with more drama than others. Some versions have the bases loaded. Some have it happening in the 9th inning. The core of it never changes though. The pitch in the blowout was bait. The changeup in October was the hook, and Bagwell was the fish. Now here is why this story refuses to die even among people who pick it apart. It is not because every fact lines up perfectly, it is because it sounds exactly like something Greg Maddux would do. And that is the most important part. When you spend a career building a reputation for cold, calculating intelligence, the stories do not have to be perfect. They just have to sound right. And this one sounds right because the man it describes was absolutely the kind of pitcher who would think 7 moves ahead and sacrifice a home run to win the war. Jeff Bagwell is a proud man, a smart man, a man who worked incredibly hard at his craft. The idea that someone used his own preparation against him, turned his memory into a weapon pointed back at his face, would stay with a man like that forever. Not because he lost, hitters lose all the time, but because he felt like he was used, like the whole sequence was scripted before he even picked up a bat. That is what the legend says. That is why people believe it. And now let us look at what the records actually show. Because the truth, as it often is with Greg Maddux, is just as fascinating as the myth. Here is where things get interesting. Because when you go back and look at the actual game logs, the Bagwell gambit does not line up the way the story says it does. And yet the feeling it captures is completely real. Let us start with the home run. The legend says Maddux fed Bagwell a gift pitch during a blowout in 1997, letting him hit one out to plant the memory. But according to the research, Bagwell did not hit a single home run off Maddux during the entire 1997 regular season. Not one. If Maddux was setting a trap with a home run that year, there is no box score to support it. The home run that most closely fits the legend actually happened in September 1996. The Astros were trailing 6-1 in the 6th inning. Bagwell hit a solo shot off Maddux. A blowout. A low-stakes moment, exactly the kind of scenario the myth describes. But it happened a full year before the 1997 postseason that the legend is usually attached to. Time has a way of compressing baseball memories, especially when the story you are telling is a good one. Then there is the postseason strikeout. In the 1997 National League Division Series Game 2, Maddux was absolutely stunning. He held the top of the Houston lineup, which included Bagwell, Craig Biggio, and Derek Bell, to a combined 0 hits across 12 at-bats. 0. For 3 of the best hitters in the National League, across 12 chances. And the game was won 2-1 by Atlanta. Bagwell's strikeout in the 8th inning with a runner on second base was the kind of moment that sticks in a hitter's chest and does not let go. But it was not bases loaded. It was not the 9th inning. It was not the exact cinematic scene the legend describes. The 1999 NLDS comes into it. Maddux allowed a home run to Bagwell in August of that year, though the Braves were only leading by 4 runs at the time, not 8 as some versions of the story claim. And the strikeout from that series came in the 1st inning of Game 1, not late in a tense elimination situation. So the myth is stitched together from real moments spread across multiple seasons. The blowout home run is real. The postseason strikeout is real. The feeling of Bagwell being outsmarted is real. What is not real is the clean, single-game sequence the story describes. Maddux did not literally give up a home run in round 1 of a planned 2-step con, at least not in the way the legend says. But here's the thing that makes the Bagwell gambit so hard to argue against. Over his entire career, Jeff Bagwell hit 7 home runs off Greg Maddux. 7. That ties for the most he ever hit off any single pitcher. So this was not a situation where Maddux completely dominated him on every level. Bagwell got his licks in over the years. He was not just a punching bag. What Maddux did, though, was land his punches at the exact right time. In October, when it mattered most, he showed up in the postseason and made Bagwell feel small in the moments that the whole country was watching. And that is what people remember, not the 7 home runs, not the regular season battles. They remember the 1997 NLDS, where the Braves swept Houston and Maddux was the reason why. In the end, the Bagwell gambit is real in the matters in baseball. It is emotionally real. It is psychologically accurate in every way that counts. It captures the feeling of facing a man who makes you doubt your own preparation. And that feeling for Jeff Bagwell apparently never fully went away. Here is the question you have to ask. Why does a story like the Bagwell Gambit survive for decades even after people have gone through the box scores and found the holes? The answer has everything to do with who Greg Maddux was as a pitcher and nothing to do with the specific facts of a specific game. Maddux was known, even among his peers, as a grandmaster of what you might call cognitive interference. That is a fancy way of saying he got inside hitters' heads and rearranged the furniture. He made them doubt things they were absolutely sure about. He made them second-guess pitches they had seen 1,000 times before. He turned their confidence into a liability. Think about what it feels like to be beaten by someone stronger than you. That is painful, but it makes sense. You lost to a better physical specimen. You understand the loss. Now think about what it feels like to be beaten by someone who is not throwing harder than you can handle, not doing anything physically overwhelming, but who has somehow turned your own brain against you. That is a different kind of defeat entirely. The worst losses in baseball are not the ones where the pitcher overpowers you. They are the ones where you feel genuinely outsmarted. Where you swing at a pitch you knew was coming because part of you thought you had already figured it out, and then you realized too late that the figuring it out was the whole trap. That is what Maddux did to hitters. That is why they called him the professor. He did not just pitch, he gave you a test you had no idea you were taking. Bagwell was too smart and too proud to laugh that off. He was the kind of competitor who prepared harder than almost anyone. He studied pitchers, he had a plan, and when that plan was flipped on him, when the preparation itself became the weakness Maddux exploited, it created a specific kind of frustration that statistics cannot fully explain. The myth sticks because every hitter who ever felt confused at the plate against Maddux recognizes the feeling the story is describing. It may not have happened exactly as told, but it happened in spirit, over and over again, to batter after batter across a 23-year career. Sluggers who had put up monster numbers all season would walk into an October game against Maddux and suddenly feel like a minor leaguer trying to read a language they had never studied. The Bagwell Gambit is not just one story. It is a collection of feelings that all got packed into a single legend. And now let us talk about the other men who felt those same feelings, because Bagwell was not alone. Not even close. Number 7. Mike Maddux. Before Greg Maddux outsmarted anyone in a major league stadium, he was outsmarting his older brother in the back garden. Not just outsmarting him. beating him consistently, finding every possible edge and using it without mercy. Mike Maddux was not a bad player. He had a solid professional career as a pitcher and later became one of the most respected pitching coaches in the game. But Greg was always something else entirely. According to Mike, even as kids, the youngest Maddux brother could not stand losing. It was not just that he wanted to win, he needed to win. As Mike put it, if Greg could not win, he simply did not want to play. Full stop. No negotiation. There was no casual game in that household. There was only competing and there was standing aside. On the 29th of September, 1986, the two brothers made history. They became the first rookie brothers in Major League Baseball history to start a game against one another. Greg was pitching for the Cubs. Mike was pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies. It was already a significant moment as a piece of baseball history. Greg made sure it was more than a footnote. He threw 7.2 innings, gave up very little, and walked nobody. He struck out 7 batters. His team won 8-3. Mike lasted 3 innings and gave up 3 runs. Greg took the win and reportedly took the bragging rights that came with it through the entire winter that followed. That competitiveness, that absolute refusal to let anyone beat him, even when the person trying to beat him was his own blood, was the foundation of everything that followed. Every mind game, every trap, every cold calculation on the mound began in a back garden with a ball and 2 brothers, and one of them who simply could not walk away from a loss. Number 6, Ryne Sandberg. Not all of Maddux's rivalries happened on the mound. Some of them happened in boardrooms and contract negotiations, and the damage they left behind was the kind that could not be fixed with a good pitch. Ryne Sandberg was one of the greatest players in Cubs history. He and Maddux were teammates. They were respected professionals who understood what it meant to represent the same franchise. And then Maddux left. After winning his first Cy Young Award in 1992, Maddux became a free agent. The Cubs, for reasons that are still difficult to think about if you are a Chicago fan, did not make him a competitive enough offer. The Atlanta Braves stepped in and signed him. And just like that, one of the best pitchers in baseball was no longer in blue pinstripes. Sandberg, according to accounts from that period, did not take this well. He viewed the departure as a form of betrayal. He believed in loyalty to the organization, in being the kind of player who stays. Maddux chose a better situation. Some people respected that choice. Sandberg was not one of them. Then came opening day, 1993. Maddux's first game back at Wrigley Field, this time wearing the colors of the enemy. You would think a man might ease his way back in, play it a little quietly, maybe not rub it in. Maddux threw 8.1 innings of shutout baseball on 125 pitches. He was dominant, clean, and absolutely ruthless. The kind of performance that does not say anything out loud but says everything anyway. The Braves went on to become the dominant team of the decade. Maddux won 3 more consecutive Cy Young Awards after leaving Chicago. The message was impossible to miss. He had not just left the Cubs, he had left them with a blueprint for how good he was going to be, and they had let it walk out the door. Sandberg had every right to be frustrated. He had been a loyal servant of that franchise for years, and watching the best pitcher they ever had walk away for a bigger offer stung in a way that did not fade quickly. But the box score from opening day 1993 made it very difficult to argue with the choice that Maddux had made. Number 5, Andre Dawson. There is a code in baseball, an unwritten set of rules that most players understand without ever reading them anywhere. One of those rules is that if someone on your team gets hurt, someone on their team is going to feel it too. Greg Maddux understood this code deeply. He may have been the professor on the mound, all chess moves and calculation, but he was a teammate above everything else. On the 7th of July, 1987, the San Diego Padres pitcher Eric Show threw a pitch that struck Cubs outfielder Andre Dawson directly in the face. It was the kind of moment that made the whole stadium go quiet. Dawson was a star. He was beloved, and he was on the ground. Maddux did not deliberate long. He decided immediately that someone was going to pay for what happened to Dawson. The problem was timing. Maddux was on the mound that day, and he had not yet pitched 5 innings, which was the requirement to qualify for the win. The Cubs manager warned him clearly, if you retaliate before 5 innings, you will lose the win. And if you keep losing wins, you are going back down to the minors. Maddux plunked Benito Santiago in the 4th inning anyway. He was ejected immediately. He did not qualify for the win, and he was sent back down to Double-A. Any young pitcher with one eye on his own career numbers might have hesitated. Maddux did not. He went to Double-A and posted 3 wins with an ERA just under 1. He was back in the majors very soon after. But the point had already been made. Maddux had chosen his teammate over his personal statistics. He had chosen loyalty over numbers. Andre Dawson reportedly never forgot it. According to accounts from that era, Dawson made sure to show up for every single game that Maddux started for the remainder of their time together. A quiet, consistent thank you from a proud man to a young teammate who had stood up when it mattered. The professor had done something that day that had nothing to do with thinking. He had just acted, and the respect it earned lasted a career. Number 4, Jose Canseco. If the Dawson incident showed the loyal side of Maddux's code, the Jose Canseco story shows what it looks like when that same code gets pointed at a very famous target. In a game between the Atlanta Braves and the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, Braves shortstop Walt Weiss had been hit by a Tampa Bay pitch. Then more Braves batters got hit. The dugout was not happy. Manager Bobby Cox made a decision. He told Maddux to hit the first man up in the next inning. The first man. Whoever it was. No exceptions. Maddux heard the instruction and asked one question. He wanted to know who the leadoff hitter was going to be. When someone told him it was Jose Canseco, the story goes that Maddux paused and asked whether he should wait for the second batter instead. The answer from Cox was no. First man. Canseco got hit. Now, Canseco at this point in his career was a complicated figure. He was a former MVP. He was also very publicly associated with performance-enhancing drugs, something that had made him a divisive presence in the sport. Some people called him the chemist because of how openly he talked about what he had taken and what he believed about doping in baseball. But here is the important detail. Canseco did not charge the mound. He did not lose his temper. He took the hit because he understood the code. He knew what had happened to the Braves batters. He knew why it was happening to him, and he accepted it the way a professional accepts something that is simply part of the game. Maddux later explained that you need the respect of the men behind you in the field. They have to know you are willing to stand up for them. Hitting Canseco was not personal. It was a statement. The professor could be cold, he could be calculated, but he was never soft, and the men around him knew exactly where he stood. Number 3. Will Clark. There are moments in sport that change everything, not just for the game in question, not just for the season, but for the whole way the sport is played from that point forward. The Will Clark moment in 1989 is one of those moments. Game 1 of the National League Championship Series, Wrigley Field. Chicago Cubs versus San Francisco Giants. The game was close, the tension was high, and in the 4th inning, with the bases loaded, Greg Maddux walked to the mound for a conference with his pitching coach Dick Pohl and his catcher, Rick Rona. Standing in the on-deck circle, waiting for his turn to bat, was Will Clark. Clark was known around the league as one of the most gifted, natural hitters of his generation. They called him the Thrill. He had a beautiful swing, a fierce competitive nature, and, on this particular day, very good eyesight. Because Will Clark read Maddux's lips during that mound conference. As Maddux spoke to his teammates, Clark watched from the on-deck circle and worked out what was being said. The pitch selection? Fastball high inside. Clark walked to the plate knowing exactly what was coming. And when it came, he did not miss. Grand slam. The stadium erupted. The Giants went on to win that game by a score of 11-3. Clark finished the entire series hitting 650 from 20 at-bats, 13 hits and 20 tries. He single-handedly dismantled the Chicago pitching rotation and played a massive role in ending the Cubs' season. For Maddux, the lesson was immediate and permanent. From that point forward, every time he walked out for a mound conference, he covered his mouth with his glove. It became such a consistent habit that it spread across the entire league over the years that followed. Today, if you watch any game of baseball at any level, you will see pitchers covering their mouths during mound meetings. Every single one of them is following a practice that Greg Maddux started because Will Clark had better eyesight than he expected. Some people say Maddux started covering his mouth to hide his language from his wife Kathy, who was watching on television and did not appreciate it. That may well be true, but the Clark incident made the tactical reason undeniable. Maddux never let anyone read his lips again. He turned a public embarrassment into a league-wide standard. That is very much on brand for a man who responded to every single defeat by becoming harder to beat. Number 2, Tony Gwynn. Most pitchers have one hitter they cannot figure out, that one guy who just seems to have their number no matter what they try. For Greg Maddux, that man was Tony Gwynn. And the numbers he put up are so extraordinary that even now they seem almost impossible. In 103 plate appearances against Greg Maddux, Tony Gwynn batted 429. Against a man who routinely made Hall of Fame hitters look completely lost at the plate. Against a pitcher who could put a ball in the exact spot he wanted on virtually every single delivery. Gwynn hit him like he was throwing batting practice. And here is the part that really gets to people. In all 103 of those plate appearances, Tony Gwynn never struck out. Not once. Not a single time. Maddux had a philosophy. He believed that if a pitcher could change speeds well enough, every hitter in baseball was essentially helpless because the human eye cannot fully process the deception. He believed this deeply. He built his entire career around it, and it worked on almost everyone. Then he faced Tony Gwynn and had to make an exception. Maddux himself reportedly said, in language that cannot be repeated cleanly here, that every hitter was helpless against speed changes. Every hitter? Except for Tony Gwynn. He singled Gwynn out as the one man who simply did not fit the system. The one man he could not crack. The reason was technical, but also almost poetic. Most hitters, even great ones, make a kind of early commitment during a pitch's flight. They start reading the ball and they commit to a decision. Maddux exploited that window. He sold one pitch and delivered another. But Gwynn had a short, compact stroke that let him wait longer than any other hitter of his era. He did not guess. He reacted. And by the time Maddux's deception was meant to land, Gwynn had already adjusted. Gwynn did not try to beat Maddux at his own game. He played a completely different game. He consistently drove the ball into the gap between third base and shortstop, an area that Gwynn had essentially made his personal property over the course of his career. Maddux's best pitches went exactly where Gwynn wanted them to go. This was not just a rivalry, it was a clash between two of the greatest minds the sport has ever produced. Maddux was the pitcher who lived in hitters' heads. Gwynn was the hitter who simply refused to let him in. He had no interest in Maddux's psychological games and no vulnerability to them either. And for Maddux, a man who prided himself on solving every problem the batter's box presented, that had to sting more than any home run ever could. Number 1. Barry Bonds. When you are the most feared hitter in the history of baseball, most pitchers approach you with a very specific kind of anxiety. They overthink, they try too hard, they either walk you immediately or attempt something brilliant and pay the price. They lose sleep over matchups that have not even happened yet. Entire game plans fall apart because a pitcher starts second-guessing himself the moment Bonds walks into the on-deck circle. Barry Bonds saw this from virtually every pitcher he faced during his peak years in the early 2000s. Maddux saw it differently, and what he said about Bonds is one of the most revealing things he ever said about his own approach to the game. He called Bonds the easiest hitter to pitch to. Not because Bonds was not dangerous, he absolutely was, but because the strategy was simple and required no guesswork at all. If the game is on the line, you walk him. If it is not, you try to get him out. Clean, logical, no drama. What makes the Bonds and Maddux story remarkable over time is how the numbers shift in Maddux's favor as both men aged. In the earlier part of their careers, Bonds dominated Maddux. From 1986 to 1993, Bonds hit 343 against him with an on-base percentage of 425. He was doing what great hitters did against Maddux in that period, which was still not always enough because Maddux was barely hittable by anyone. But as Maddux's velocity continued to drop, as he was regularly sitting below 86 miles per hour, something strange happened. He became more effective against Bonds, not less. From 2001 onwards, in 31 plate appearances, Bonds hit just 120 against him, 1 home run in 31 chances. This was during the very same period when Bonds was maintaining an on-base percentage well above 1.000 against the rest of the league. Maddux had stopped trying to strike Bonds out. He had stopped trying to do anything impressive. He just focused on forcing contact on his terms and trusting his defense to handle the rest. The strikeout rate dropped and the success rate climbed. He had essentially turned Bonds into a puzzle with a known solution, and then calmly applied that solution every single time they met. Bonds hit 262 with 8 home runs across 154 career plate appearances against Maddux. Solid numbers for anyone, but nowhere near what Bonds was doing to the rest of baseball. Maddux had, in his quiet and calculated way, handled the most dangerous hitter the sport has ever seen. Here is something that tells you everything about the kind of pitcher Greg Maddux was. Amongst the people who played alongside him and against him, there is a specific term that carries his name. A Maddux. Not a Nolan Ryan, not a Roger Clemens, not a Randy Johnson, a Maddux. And what it means tells you everything about how he thought and what he valued more than anything else on a baseball field. A Maddux is a complete game shutout thrown in fewer than 100 pitches. Think about that for a moment. A full 9 innings, no runs allowed, and you did it so efficiently that you used less than 100 pitches to get there. Most pitchers today are pulled after 5 or 6 innings and 90 pitches. Maddux was finishing entire games with fewer than 100. The finest example came on the 2nd of July, 1997. Maddux faced the New York Yankees, one of the most powerful lineups in baseball. 9 innings, 3 hits, no walks, 8 strikeouts. He did all of that on 84 pitches. 84. The Yankees hit the ball, and they got out. They barely made him work. He was so precise that they were essentially helping him finish his own job. His success was built on 3 things. First, he had late movement on his sinker, the two-seam fastball that broke away from right-handed hitters at the last possible second. Second, he threw a circle changeup that looked identical to a fastball coming out of his hand and arrived at a completely different speed. Third, he could repeat his delivery with almost mechanical consistency. Hitters could not find a difference between his fastball grip and his changeup grip. The ball looked the same every single time until it absolutely was not. Orel Hershiser, himself a great pitcher, once said that Maddux could throw a ball into a teacup from 60 feet. That level of command made even the smallest part of the strike zone feel enormous for Maddux and impossibly tight for the batter. He did not need strikeouts. He wanted contact, early contact. A ground ball on the first pitch is more valuable than a strikeout on the 6th, because a ground ball costs 1 pitch and a strikeout costs potentially 6. Over the course of 9 innings, that economy adds up enormously. It is why he led the National League in innings pitched 5 times. It is why he pitched at least 194 innings for 21 straight seasons. He was almost never hurt because his mechanics were clean and his approach was completely sustainable. He won 18 Gold Gloves as a fielder. 18. That means he was not just exceptional at pitching. He was an elite defender who turned his own position into a 5th infielder, cutting off sharp grounders back through the box that other pitchers would not even attempt. For hitters, this was the most insulting part of it all. Maddux did not blow you away with power. He did not embarrass you with a wicked breaking ball. He just moved you around the strike zone, shifted your weight, changed your timing, invited your best swing, and made sure your best swing went directly at someone wearing a glove. You did not feel beaten by raw talent. You felt beaten by planning. And for a proud professional hitter, that is uniquely infuriating. In 1994, his ERA was 1.56 over 202 innings. This was the height of the offensive era in baseball. Hitters were bigger, stronger, and more aggressive than any generation before them. And Maddux walked through that era like a man doing a crossword puzzle on a quiet afternoon. He won 355 games in his career. He struck out 3,371 batters. He walked fewer than 2 batters per 9 innings across the whole of his career. He was quietly, relentlessly, and almost rudely brilliant. And that brings us back to where this story always ends up. October 1997. The Houston Astros and the Atlanta Braves. The National League Division Series. Jeff Bagwell standing in against Greg Maddux with everything on the line. By that point in the season, Bagwell had been through everything a professional hitter goes through. He had prepared obsessively, he had studied tape, he had talked to teammates about how to approach Maddux. He had gone over the tendencies, the patterns, the sequences. He had done what great hitters do. He had turned his preparation into confidence. He felt ready. Maddux had done the same, except what he had prepared was Bagwell himself. He had stored away every at-bat, every pitch Bagwell had reacted to, every moment where Bagwell's confidence had been just a little too high. And in Game 2 of the 1997 NLDS, he used all of it. The Braves held the entire Houston lineup to nothing. Craig Biggio, Derek Bell, and Jeff Bagwell combined for 0 hits and 12 at-bats. 0. 3 elite hitters, 12 chances between them, and Maddux gave up nothing. Then came the 8th inning, runner on second base, Astros trailing by 1 run, Bagwell at the plate. The strikeout in that moment was not just a strikeout, it was a conclusion. It was the end of a sentence that Maddux had been writing across an entire career of careful study. He had shown Bagwell certain things during the season. He had made him comfortable with certain pitches. He had let him build a degree of confidence that turned, in that October moment, into exactly the wrong response. The Braves won 2-1. Atlanta swept the series. Maddux was the primary reason it went the way it did, and Bagwell walked away from that postseason carrying something heavier than just a loss. He carried the feeling of being managed, handled, prepared for in advance by someone who had thought about the whole situation far more than he had. Now, the story of the Bagwell Gambit, as you now know, is not a perfectly clean sequence. The blowout home run and the postseason strikeout did not happen in the same year in the way the legend describes. But the 1996 home run is real. The 1997 strikeout is real. And the feeling they created together across 2 seasons is exactly the feeling the legend captures. That is the thing about Greg Maddux that made so many hitters quietly furious. He did not have to do it in one game. He was patient enough to work across months and years. Your preparation was his preparation. Your memory was his weapon. And if you came to the plate in October thinking you had it figured out, you were probably already exactly where he wanted you. Jeff Bagwell hit 7 career home runs off Greg Maddux, more than he hit off any other single pitcher. And it still was not enough, because the moments that mattered were not the ones where Bagwell won. They were the ones where Maddux did. And Maddux had a very particular talent for making those moments happen precisely when the whole world was watching. Here's the thing about Greg Maddux that is genuinely worth respecting, even if you find the whole chess master routine a little cold. He changed the game. He changed the way pitchers thought about their craft. He changed the way hitters prepared. He changed the physical habits of an entire sport with one mound conference at Wrigley Field in 1989. And he did it without throwing a single pitch above 90 miles per hour. The Bagwell Gambit, real or myth, is the perfect story for the perfect career. A pitcher so cerebral, so calculated, so focused on the long game that even the stories people tell about him feel like they might be traps themselves. A man who made baseball feel less like athletics and more like a thinking person's sport, and who won over and over again by treating the whole thing as one long chess match that he had already planned several moves ahead of everyone else. Jeff Bagwell may never fully forgive Greg Maddux, not because losing hurts. Losing is part of sport and every great hitter accepts that, but because being outsmarted stays with you differently. It makes you question your own process. And when your process is everything, that question never fully goes away. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. Leave a comment below as well. Who do you think got the better of it in the long run, Bagwell or Maddux? Bagwell? The scoreboard says one thing. The legend says another. Let us know which you believe.